Welcome to part 2 of this series on mixing up the modes. If you're interested in using the musical modes in your music, then you've come to the right place. My name's Rich. Let's dive straight in. So as before, this video is based on Persichetti book, 20th-Century Harmony. We began part 1 by covering some of Persichetti ideas about modes. We talked about the 7 standard modes and how each one has its own character. We can put the character of each mode into words, and maybe that'll be a topic for a future video. But honestly, the best way to get a feel for the moods of each mode is capable of is just to play around with them. We talked about how each mode has a characteristic flavor tone. We enhance the character of the mode by making sure to include that in our music. We mentioned the primary and secondary chords of each mode. And finally, we talked about how the chordal makeup of each mode includes a tritone chord and why we need to be careful using it. So if you're interested in this topic and you haven't checked out that video yet, that's definitely worth doing. Okay, so let's move on to the content of this video. Let's start by looking at modal mixture. This is really about combining different modes within one passage of music. So a musical passage can remain within one mode, or it can switch between them freely. And a passage might switch between modes while keeping the same modal tonic, right? And the example you see here on the slide is one from Persichetti book. You can see that this begins in A Locrian, and you'll remember that Locrian is the darkest mode. This passage then progresses through each other mode and finally lands in Lydian, the brightest of the standard modes. So we go through each mode here, but he's keeping A as the nominal modal tonic. So here's what that sounds like. Here's another example, this time for the French horn with a very simple cello accompaniment. We're only going through 4 modes this time: Ionian, Aeolian, Dorian, and then Phrygian. And we're keeping C as the nominal tonic throughout. So a musical passage might have several parts playing different modes, but with the same tonic, right? So a typical example would be a melody in one mode with supporting harmony from another mode. And this is what gives us a polymodal texture. So here you can see a passage for a solo flute with strings accompaniment. The flute, as you can see here, is in C Lydian, and that's colored green. And the strings are also in C, but C Dorian, and they're colored blue. So here's what that sounds like. So these two parts using different modes, it definitely gives it a particular kind of sound. It still sounds cohesive, but it also has this slightly unearthly quality that comes from the fact that they're both in different modes. Even more adventurous would be a passage with 2 different modes, each with its own separate key center. So these passages would be both polymodal, because we've got 2 different modes happening at the same time, and polytonal, because each mode has its own separate key center. So here's another example. This time we can see this one is for oboe and bassoon. So the oboe is the lilac one here, and the bassoon is the more pinky colored one underneath. So the oboe is in C Aeolian, and the bassoon is in G Mixolydian. So let's have a listen, see what that sounds like. So again, that has a slightly otherworldly kind of sound. The instruments are playing together, but it's like each one is almost in its own world. And the great thing about this is that even though polymodality and polytonality, they're considered to be advanced musical concepts, but it's actually really easy to do this in a DAW, right? We could begin by writing, say, a melody and an accompaniment or a counterpoint line in the same mode with the same tonic, and then we can just easily edit or transpose one of those parts and just see what that sounds like. We've got 7 different standard modes and 12 different possible key centers, so there are tons of possibilities, and we're almost certainly going to come up with something that we like. Okay, so on to our final couple of examples. This time, I wanted to do this as a comparison. So firstly, we'll hear a passage with the accompaniment in the same key and mode as the melody. So the melody is with the flute, oboe, and trumpet in unison. The accompaniment is again just a simple figure in the strings, and in this first example, everything is in C Lydian. So same mode, same key center. Okay, so now we'll have the same passage. This time we'll keep the melody exactly the same. That'll stay in C Lydian, but this time the accompaniment has changed. So we're going to change the key center to F, and we're going to change the mode to Phrygian mode. So the accompaniment now only uses notes from F Phrygian, right? And you can see this here on the slide. So the melody line is colored in pink, and the accompaniment line is in the blue color there. So let's have a listen to that. So you can hear how different that sounds compared to the first version. Something like this could be really useful, for example, if we have a theme or a melody and we just want a simple way of varying the character without changing the melody too much. Yeah, we can do what I've done here. We can just keep the same melody and reharmonize it using a different mode or a different modal tonic or both. So if you're finding this material useful, this PowerPoint is available from my website. So if you would like that, just head on over to richmillington.com and you can download the slides for free. That's my gift to you for watching this video. So if you've enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like, subscribe and share to keep up with future videos about composition and music production. So I really hope you found that useful and that this tour around the modes has given you some ideas to play around with in your own music. So just to recap from part 1, the first video, as well as this video, modes can be used like colors or flavorings. We can play any mode with any key as our home tonic. Chords with a tritone, so each mode has one chord that has a tritone in it. These can pull us into a major key. So we need to be a little bit careful using chords with a tritone, but there are ways to avoid this. We can use several different modes within a single passage of music. We don't have to stick to using the same mode throughout a passage or a phrase. We can also have a passage of music that has 2 modes that use the same tonic. So for example, melody with one, accompaniment with the other. Or we can have something completely different. We can have 2 different modes with 2 different tonics. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.